Thank you for choosing us over two brilliant sessions as well. But this, in its way, will be brilliant too. I should say that I am here under false pretenses because in no stretch or imagination am I a writer of nature. The closest I get is the shirt that I am wearing right now. But you will be in capable hands over the next 50 minutes or so, because we will hear lots of different perspectives on what poetry in nature can be. And hopefully, by the end of our time together, you will get a sense that it is not just about lyrical and moving descriptions of what we can find in nature, but we will discover that it is a space for transformation, a place where we can start to discover wonder and joy. But we will also hopefully discover some of the more political aspects that there are to nature, and maybe that we don't necessarily think about or touch on all the time, but you'll hear them running through. You've heard everyone's bios. I'll ask everyone just a little question, just to give you a sense of how and where their poetics of nature are coming from before everyone reads for a few moments. And we should hopefully have enough time for your questions as well, so please start thinking about those. But to begin, Ruth Padel. Ruth, what is the draw of the natural world to us as writers, as readers, as people? Why do we keep coming back to?
Well, I think we started out, during the Ice Age as... it should be here.
It doesn't seem to be connected.
Okay, I'll hold it nearer.
Keep talking, I'll put...
Speak for... Oh, you'll bring me up. You'll bring me up. Okay. Okay, so we started out in the nature, in the Ice Age, the natural Ice Age. We were portraying our sense of ourselves when we were in those caves. And what did we do? We painted animals. We think with the natural, we always have, as people and as artists, we've thought with the natural world, and we still do today. So, and I was thinking about this today, and I think it's about relationships. We are pattern-making animals, and we think about relationships. We think in terms of relationships. We see a cow licking her calf, and we think that's like us. We see one plant bending to another, or a bird picking something off, and we think ourselves. We think with nature, and we need it.
Fabulous. Can I invite you to read some poems for us?
Right, okay. Am I going to get...
Let's have a look.
Ooh. Yay. We didn't know quite if that was going to happen. Okay. So I thought I'd start, since this is the JLF, I thought I'd start with an Indian goddess. And the goddess is Kundalini, whose name comes from the baskets, coiled baskets coming up, rising up like a serpent, and then like a serpent. So she is the serpent force in your spine, coming right up your spine. To anybody who does Kundalini yoga. Anybody here does Kundalini yoga? Okay, great. So there's this sense of the serpent rising through your spine to the top of your head. Okay. Serpent rising through your spine to the top of your head. And that is Kundalini's force. And she often appears as a teenage girl. And I sometimes sing raga with my brother, who's a raga guru. And he's taught me a Kundalini raga, which I'm not going to try and sing today. But I'm going to read you a poem about the sense of her. A raga for Kundalini. Like an astronaut, looking back at our dazzle blue pearl of meandering ocean, shoreline and river swell, the rice of pleasure and the rice of pain. And reporting, they always say something like this, how up there, among music of the spheres, they know, just really know, none of our normal worries matter, all this fretwork down below. Nothing matters except the earth is here, still here, and beautiful. So, at the magical age of 77, opening my throat to set free the tantric serpent of the goddess, her naga energy coiled at the base of the spine, singing the intervals, the space, flow of grace, and this melody, asking you and me to live with mystery. I feel a flower opening in my heart, like bringing starlight in from the dark, and I try to circle my voice around each note, as around a ruby fallen on the path. So I'll just explain the other figures there. They are the Minoan so-called snake goddesses found in Crete, in smithereens, by a male archaeologist in 1902. And he put them together very rapidly in this way. And I'm interested in this word that came in the blurb, and I use it again, shapes and is shaped by. Our imagination shapes and is shaped by. But a girl, when she grows up, even at the age of 2, her figure, she's going to go into a world in which her girlhood is shaped and is shaped by male imagination. I know it happens the other way around too, but I'm just interested in the girl for the moment. And so those goddesses didn't have to be that shape. They were remade by 2 men. So here is Serpent Queen on the 88 bus. Eros kicks his bare ankle in the air at the heart of my city, and the Serpent Queen fixes me with her basilisk stare from a TV ad on a bus I have just stepped out of. I remember a circus, a trapeze artiste and 2 yellow pythons squeezing her breast, neck, thighs. It took 4 other girls in leotards to drape each one around her. Why do men want to see naked girls fooling with snakes? All I know is the snake goddess telling her tale straight to camera in stiff black brocade. Having died, she tells me, all the way back to the root, I grow again. The serpent of the unconscious has a wisdom of its own, and I am the treasure it guards. Touch her, and you'd shiver at powers of the earth, which men from some dark room unease of their souls load onto a girl. Punishment, Hades, fast cars, undrinkable rivers, and a woman's body at the center of the world. So can we have, yes. So the next slide, that's a guy from the Irula, south of Chennai. I went out snake catching with them when I was writing a novel about snakes. He's holding a king cobra. He did not give me a king cobra. I held a non-venomous snake. But the poem, which you'll see there, is in the form of a snake. And holding that completely wild snake, which he found at the base of a tree, and then let go again. And what he told me, I had the sense of this creature that has been, for Jung, the image of the unconscious, for everybody. It's earth. It's a messenger. It's extraordinary. And I think that's your question. Mm-hmm. What are we drawn to? We're drawn to this sense of something that is other, but is also from ourselves. Snake wrangling in the wild. Let it flow, said my guide, from the Irula, people of the dark. Let it ribbon and stream through your hands. Don't clutch, it will turn and bite. Its reptile brain wants to keep moving. Never mind that it never gets anywhere. He scooped a slim, bronze-checkered snake from the roots of a banyan tree. He rippled it through his hands as if it were raw silk. He smiled. He loved it. He poured it like a gold sleeve into my hand. It felt heavier than I expected, a smooth thread of almost warm steel, flowing, searching, like the memory of a lost relationship with the earth, but so calm. So finally, I'm very aware that all my wonderful colleagues with their wonderful poems I need to leave time for. The last poem is for a friend of mine who died last year. She was a wonderful enabler of poets, a poet herself. She founded the Hazel Press. And this is called Maybe Ditch the Goddess. Listening to the snow, is it there? Oh. Okay, you can see how in there I am right at the root of all of our relationships, our sense of good and evil, our sense of where we are in the world is our relationship with animals. Listening to the snow melt of the patriarchy, but reckoning the scars left by its 10,000 tentacle reach into our minds, Eve and the Virgin, purity and sin and the rest, which we have laughed about, you and I, but mourned all our lives. I think how girl is in you still these last days while your breath is still coming and going. But maybe the thing is now, forget the goddess. Just be strong for the world. Keep the sacred and the snakes if we like. In fact, certainly honor the snakes. But look for protection in ourselves. Fight for the things that crack light into our lives like eggs into a bowl. Knowing that finding the thread happens on the brink and beyond. Like Psyche, the searching girl, whispering her feathers into the wind, poised at the precipice, which is also the edge of epiphany and whatever lies beyond. For the girl or girl boy, diving like liquid through air, the ivory acrobat, reaching out to the monster's horns as a drop dies in the river of its joy.
Thank you, Ruth. I don't think I've ever thought about worshipping snakes before. That's going to be something that's going to stay with me for a while. So. Thank you. We turn next to Seán. And Seán, ever since I first encountered your poetry, what's been so striking about it is the way that you use nature and particular types of landscapes, think of the hedgerows and the hawthorns and the forest as well, as spaces in which your lyric eyes, your characters, your personas go to effectively find themselves, be changed. Partly what's the thinking there, but also what sort of drew you to that sense of nature as a place where transformation can occur?
Can you hear me with this, or should I use the handheld as well? That's fine. Yeah, okay. I think for me, or the way that nature seems to work for me in my poems is that because it sits outside of culture, and it works, like Ruth was saying, in so many different ways, that you might see a fungus growing on a hawthorn, transforming it into something else, which happens in one of my poems. It offers you different pathways for thinking about how you might transform your own self. So it seems to me to be a sort of spiritual place in which transformations might occur. And I think, like Ruth was saying, because it's all about relationality, I think every time you encounter a space in the natural world, it's different to the last time you encountered it, and by definition you're then different within it. You feel yourself differently. And often I think your kind of boundaries slip into the place in which you are. At least that's how I feel about them. So often my poems kind of sit at those boundaries or allow themselves to slip through. Yeah.
Sounds fantastic. Shall we hear some boundary-slipping poems?
Yeah, of course. So I thought I would read you a couple of poems from both of my collections. I only have two, unlike Ruth. This is the first poem from Rapture's Road. It's called A Ministry. You're going to have to imagine that you're in Ireland in January. I know that's like quite a stretch from where we are right now. But I guess I was thinking about this idea of returning to similar places in the poems, and also I wanted to start off with a sort of dance macabre. There is another speaker in this poem who might be a kind of earlier version of me, or it might be a sort of love relationship. I'll let you decide. Can you hear me okay? It's called A Ministry. Why did you bring me here again, feet? Although it is January and seasonably cold, there is a gathering in the copse above the lake. Fires, only a few icy stars, the air in the hillocks pocketed with mist. Like the inside of a mussel shell, the way the night sky sheens, humid and bone-hard and lucent. The dark-haired youth dancing between the rowans in his red flame-stitched tunic is not me. I like it when his torso snaps, when he puts this vine of wind flowers between my lips. Little bird, he likes it when I break among the tamarisk, the feather moss, setting the paper wings in the grass aflight. I suppose it is just like grief to open until a voice comes out. Just so, how each night I play both sinner and priest, assigning prayers, the dog collar, the dove, the blister of thorns. Yes, I have been here before. Soon the fires will smoke white with the sound of pines. One of us will be chosen. I have tried each time to be kind to myself, to forgive both men. Between the ornate screen of the winter branches, I walk my body, or my body walks me. Firmer now, the dark-haired youth behind me. He likes it. He likes me when I break. It gives him something to assemble. Good boy, good mirror. A white moth settles on my tongue. Beautiful and mine, these nights I fall, forgive, commit. And only now does God, our audience of one, come in to lift the blanket from my cage. When I break predictably into song. For a while, I was asked to write a poem for the radio, for the BBC, and I didn't really know what I would do, but I got it into my head that it would have to be a poem that someone who was like washing the dishes or driving the car might be able to hear and take in at the same time. And I fell into something that I hadn't written before, but which was the ballad form of poetry, which I know is like deeply unfashionable, but I hope you'll forgive me. And I wanted to write a poem that felt like the whole of Rapture's Road is sort of set in an apocalyptic dreamscape. And I thought of these poems in my head as like love poems at the end of the world or something like that. And in this poem, I wanted to do justice to my sense of kind of imminent collapse in the climate and in nature, but also what we might do to reverse it. And love and rapture seemed to assert themselves along with rewilding as forms of hope. So I wrote this poem for the radio, but then I guess I liked it enough to keep it, and it's just called Night Ballad. The owl in the woods has a hollowed cry, and the moth has a furry flutter. But you, my love, and me alone have the tender touch of another. Unspirited now, untenanted waste, the meadow all locked in its end. All hours are after, all pasts are done, and the future too heavy to bend. The hedgehog is haunted by dreams of the fox, and the fox by the bands of men. But come, my love, with me alone, to inhabit those years again. Come down between the yews to the glade where the last flowers bloom. For all colour is gone, all wonder is lost, to the coal and the petrol fume. Come petal the night, its amorous scent, with primrose and jasmine and phlox. What spirits might rise, what vapours appear when our seeds have ruined the clocks. I think I'll just read 2 more poems for you. One from the end of my first collection, Tongues of Fire, which I wrote and had nearly finished with. I'd signed the contract for it and it was kind of ready to go. And then my father got diagnosed with, very surprisingly, stage 4 cancer. It was, and within about 2 months, he died. But I ended up writing a series of poems at the end of this collection that were about that. They were before he died, but I suppose kind of in the time in which you're aware that death is coming and there's nothing you can do to stop it, and you have to just kind of live your life with that knowledge for however long it might happen. And as it happens, I was in Cambodia at the time. I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Angkor complex in Cambodia, but if you have, you'll remember the temple Ta Prohm, which is the one, you might have seen images on it, but there are trees that are kind of holding up the temple. And I believe if you took the trees away, the temple would now fall down. They're kind of integral to the structure. Those trees are called silk cottons and strangler figs. And this poem is just called Ta Prohm. A stifling heat, the air heavy, and all around the loud, wet forest, knotting the gaps in its own sound. A peace long earned, then broken, anew far off in the hospice bed. Silk cotton, strangler fig, fastened here on the temple as though it grew down from heaven, was sent to hold in place all this human work. And later, through the house of fire, the fallen galleries, I climbed in blue smoke to where the god sat, ringed with incense. And yes, I knelt to her, and yes, I prayed through unbelief. Perhaps now, Father, only something old and impossible can save us. Okay, one last poem. This I don't need to explain anything about, I don't think. It's just called Wild Garlic, and it is about wild garlic. It is, unless, I guess you know what wild garlic is, right? It's like little white, it's garlic. Thank you very much for listening. Out in the copse after rain, too late after dark to be here. Warm soil, woodlice dripping from the underside of leaves. I root down to the tender stalks and twist them free. Soaked petals dip and touch my arm. Kernels of bud, itch of foliage, of wildness on my skin. The plants are carrying the smell, earth-rich, too heavy to lift above head height, and my boots and jeans are bleached with it. I turn home, and all across the floor, the spiked white flowers light the way. The world is dark, but the wood is full of stars. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Seán. Next, we're very fortunate to be joined by Dipanjali, who is making her UK debut with us this evening. So please, a round of applause for that. I told you, an exclusive for you. Now, some of you might be familiar with her work. No nepotism here, but you won the Wasafiri New Writing Prize in 2021. And I do urge you to go look at that poem on YouTube because it's the most marvellous piece of work called Safanama. And in that, it's really striking that you're holding this sense of creation and destruction in this really attractive tension, and in this landscape that becomes like almost feral at points as well. And I'm just interested to hear more about what you were trying to achieve by showing us these two poles at the same time.
Am I audible? So I think something that I was quite obsessed with at the time that I started writing that poem was the sense of sort of a dissembled utopia, and the sense of like I was trying to write a world that could not be reproduced because its natural occurrences were so beyond our reach. But it's also quite a desolate poem, I think, and that was something that fascinated me at the time. It was this idea that like I wanted to grasp at something that felt like a portal that would simultaneously kind of bloom and deconstruct at the same, like all at the same time. And I think that informed a lot of my writing practice at that time. So the two poems that I'll be reading out are from back then, when it was, I think, the peak of COVID in Delhi at the time, and everything was kind of desolate, but there were also these pockets of sort of nostalgia that people were revisiting, and a lot of it was happening through like the ability to sort of re-access bits of the city that had been rewilded because they were just no longer inhabited by people. And that was kind of what I was thinking about when I wrote Safarnama, which I will read.
Wonderful. Let's hear it. Thank you.
So this is Safarnama. Early one morning, the meridian comes slicing through me as an origin story. I am neatly bifurcated and I do not blink. The world cracks through me and I do not blink. I stretch my limbs. I hum in front of the mirror. I drink a cup of coffee. I run through the trees. Home is far away. Each day, I pull farther and farther out of reach. Access is a weighted concept. Mostly, I just dream. In one of our worlds, there was a field of wheat. Jade horses swimming under twin moons. You and I sound asleep together each night under the pale lamplight was a wave that went chasing after its own event horizon. Our hush transmitted, nuclear swift and lightning thin. Here, amongst other things, the light never really stops breaking. There are foxes in the meadows and jackals in the fields, but the desire of man doesn't lay itself like a mask over the everyday carnage of our everyday hunt. You and I walked through the forest amongst all of its regular hunter-gatherers, the crows, the wolves, the children, the ghosts, and emerged from it reckless, phantom, fading. Truthfully, I think that I have been fading for some time now anyway. In one of our worlds, I run an apothecary of ordinary dyads. Galileo and bobtailed squid, riptides and forget-me-nots, hot water bottles, and that great spawning each November of the barrier reef. In one of our worlds, 10 years ago, there was a piano stool wide enough to accommodate the both of us side by side. In one of our worlds, I prayed for a miracle and instead received a bushel of heartseed, 3 branches of moon leaf, a teapot cup of chicory coffee, a bowl of nimki, a colony of jellyfish fluorescent in an aquarium above my head, 20 babies gurgling spit at the metro station, a bowl of peaches, a bar of soap. In one of our worlds, there was a house, a hill, a tree, an orchard full of oranges in the swollen monsoon heat. Here, everything grows always and only ever so slightly out of reach. And how long do you think you can keep loving things to their death like this? In this world, I begin to believe. All wonder lies in the wreckage of a wound. In the half-dark, in the breaking light, we might have walked through it all. In one of our worlds, we have walked through it all, yes. Yes and yes again. For as long as I know that there is a world, and daily we are loving things to death in it, if I am to build a home of this wreckage, then give me the grace to love it whole. And let me repeat for the sake of one last epiphany, yes. I stretch my limbs. I hum in front of the mirror. I drink a cup of coffee. I run through the trees. Desire harvests the mouth of the dream. It is what it is. I throw the planet of my loneliness at you. We walk through it all. Thank you. Do I have time for it? Yeah. So the second poem that I would like to read to you is kind of an anti-idyllic ode to my university, which is a tiny women's liberal arts college in Delhi. And it's kind of about the simultaneous alienation and sort of sense of belonging that you feel in a cosmopolitan city like Delhi, where people have created these pockets of idyll. And this idea of, like, you know, us trying to grapple with the canon of writers like Marx in the middle of a city where, you know, you step outside of the university gates and really, like, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. Nor should they, I think, because that is not their world, but within the university, that is that kind of dissonance that I was trying to capture. Mainly, this is just a poem about my friends and I taking a nap in the garden of the university. It's called The 18th Brumaire, or Learning to Read Karl Marx in Lajpat Nagar. And so many months, I am so fixated on the reliable lividity of this wound that one yellow afternoon, drowsy under the hard bloom of spring in Delhi and dozing beneath the amalthus on the brown grass, while some ways off from me, two girls from Econs Honors argue the Marxian repetition of history, the first time as tragedy, the second as farce. And hungry birds flicker through the eaves. I have lost my tether to the day in this all-women's arts college cliché. And now I cannot entirely tell if it is this drowsy company that I miss, or only the easy commerce of available touch. And for a while I am convinced that in a fit of second-hand cringe, the lady of all scribes and socialists has offered me her notched palm frond of empires and the dethronement of kings, that I may skip ahead a few chapters and finally come to terms with the liturgy of my ordinary sadness and my inadvertent resuscitation of so many small and dead heroes long gone between us, who had up until now been sweeping, crow-like, through the campus lawns. But in my sleep, I measure instead these pale ghosts of future wounds that rush me from the dry bark peeling off the tree at my back. And every monarch of the lotus pond, shining and verdant, a little ways beyond us, flies a crown over our heads until there is nothing much left of the courtyard but the ambition of my dull and daily heartache, sleepwalking from here to there and back again, latched to the surface of the haptic and historical in some kind of stranglehold, a picket line on the record of the real. And I know this afternoon by so many names, each one a separation, but perhaps no less ratified for it. And no small feat this, generations of scholars, scribes, and even an errant few socialists, hungrier than the birds ever were for a place in the shadow of the same yellow tree, its branches intertwined with our limbs as the foundation of some kind of reliable fixation or the other, spread out over the wingspan of a history learned untethered and half asleep, and our limbs sprawling like ley lines, and our little world in that afternoon, a wound, both reliable and livid, like so much light.
Wonderful, thank you so much. That's possibly the best nap in a garden that I've ever heard, frankly. I now feel sad that I've not been more politically productive in my naps in gardens. But that mention of the political there, I think, quite nicely brings us on to you, Karen. And all through your work, there's always been that undercurrent of political engagement with nature and what that starts to suggest. And I mean, I'm interested in particular around what poetry can do in terms of that potential political engagement that other forms of creative engagement with nature might not be able to achieve.
Oh God, Rishi,
Is that too big? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's just making me laugh because you're like, oh my God, there's so much politics in your work. But I actually think all my work's about the sacred. Okay. So it's just hilarious in that way. You know what I mean? You know, so, but that's all about perception in lots of ways. And I think actually, you know, what a poem can do in the realm of politics.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that politics lives in the realms of nature, and nature doesn't live in the realms of politics.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, rambling slightly, but also hopefully with some meaning. That's me. And Rishi, you said also at the beginning that you were like, oh God, you know, like nature, I'm just so not nature. But I was just looking up and thinking, here we are in a geodesic dome.
Yes.
What could be more nature than that? That is actually, you know, the cellular sort of structure of everything, of matter, isn't it?
The human, the human interpretation. Of
Yes.
something natural.
Oh God, look, she's arguing with me now. The nature poem, I think, for me, I think it's a poem, what it does that politics can't do, is that it's a conduit for feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sometimes think of nature poems as a sacred archive in a way.
Yeah.
You think of it as a sacred archive. And if you think of the words here, there's the words. Actually, this room is reminding me of it. There's the words. There's the silence. And somewhere in the middle is the meaning, you know?
Yeah.
That's how it kind of holds everything.
Okay.
I think that nature poems, you know, give us this. I called it in Seasonal Disturbances, I was thinking of it as an activism of the heart. If we can feel differently, if we feel differently about things, we might do things differently. And that's obviously essential now.
Can we hear some of those conduits of feeling, please?
Yeah, okay, so I've been umming and ahhing about whether or not you're in a poetry reading, and what's the two words that you really, really, really don't want to hear? I will tell you. Okay, it is audience participation. You're like, oh God, no. Okay, but this is easy, very simple, very binary. Yeah? Okay, so sometimes I sort of feel like ecological poetry, you know, it's like we can get, you had this phrase which was was it dissembled dystopia? Yeah, so sometimes we could like lean into dystopia. And then we're also sort of thinking about elegy, and we're thinking about loss. Yep. And then from that we might sort of shift towards dystopia, and then from that it might be the apocalyptic, and the next thing you know, oh my God. So my question, audience, is, would you like me to start with a poem called Happiness? Or would you like a poem about locusts? Happiness? Who's voting for happiness? Yes or no? Uh-oh.
A few happiness.
Oh.
Okay, locusts.
Oh.
Yeah, we're locusts.
Oh, listen
Team
to
locust
you lot.
win.
Oh my God.
Democracy is dangerous.
Democracy is very dangerous, Rishi, particularly when it's binary. Right. Happiness. I know you voted for locusts, but this is called happiness. When one locust meets another, the nervous system releases serotonin, causing a mutual attraction, a prerequisite for swarming. A prerequisite for swarming, serotonin, causing a mutual attraction. The nervous system releases when one locust meets another. So cute, isn't it? That's what happens. Imagine if you were a locust. Brilliant. And that's actually, I suppose, a little bit of the epilogue to all my work, in a way. Okay, so the next piece that I'll read is called Of Trees and Other Fragments. Fragments is important because it's an incredibly, these are the other words you don't like to hear in a poetry reading, incredibly long poem. Yeah, but we're just going to have some little fragments from it. It was also a commission, rather like yours, Seán, and I spent about 6 months thinking about trees, Of Trees and Other Fragments. I'll just read a little bit of this. It's in a form called a Zuihitsu. Lots of different narrative strands, all running at once. Japanese. The really good thing about it is, because it's fragmented, you have permission to drift off. Okay, a drifty moment. Oh, okay, I'm back. Oh, this bit, all right, yeah. In Warsaw, E. Annie Prue writes me a note. To Karen, poet of trees and climate change and music. What are trees? Last night, Ed and I went for a walk in the dark with the moon round to the clearing. Last night, Ed and I went for a walk. It was dark. There was moonlight. He knew his way in the dark, along and off the path. When we get there, I slip my arm around the rough-barked, slender waist of a young oak, so companionable and surprisingly warm. My fingers trace adolescent names scarred into the trunk, a wonky heart. At the reading, I tell everyone, that horse chestnut was my friend. A tree is a complex being that has relationships with soil and air, and, Jack reminds me, mycelia, as well as other trees, roots and branches and insects with teeth. When thirsty, a tree emits a noise, high and fast, audible to humankind when slowed down 1,000 times. A tree must deal with many teeth. A tree is a mass of tentacles in a sea of leaves. Driftwood, great lobster claws of rootlessness, whose palms adrift and smoothed. Driftwood, great lobster claws. What's wrong with roots? The wood asks. Yoga under the ash, and weeping willow staring up into the canopy. Ash, an unlikely synonym for green, verdant against rare, uninterrupted blue. No sign of dieback or other climactic disasters. 2 fat-breasted wood pigeons roosting and quiet. And in Jamaica, finally, land of my father. I don't know why it's happening. If I move, okay, it's just a little thing. At Devon House, a whole class gathers, chitter-chattering under a fruiting mango that reminds me of another tree at the hub of a village I passed through in Mozambique, where many men had my father's eyes. We were on our way to catch a ferry, and I stopped to capture its voluminous shade, encompassing at least 4 generations, 3 motorbikes, and a Vodacom vendor. At my desk reading, and the article describes the currently inexplicable and multiple deaths of a dozen ancient baobabs, some older than Christ. Thirst is a possible factor. Trees don't need to move to exact revenge. Leave that to the crows. Trees are, now you see me, now you. A long, drawn-out, involuntary retreat that ends in our asphyxiation. Meanwhile, give thanks for sandalwood and frankincense. Can a fragment ever be complete? Love shook my heart like the wind on the mountain, troubling the oak trees. Meanwhile, give thanks for sandalwood and frankincense. Thank you.
Right, you have made me think about where my activism is and whether it's maybe located in the wrong part of my torso. So
it's in your shirt.
Yeah, clearly. We'll now move on to Mona, to my right here, and we have some rather wonderful news in that Mona's third collection, Mouth, which is published in July, is that right?
3 weeks' time.
3 weeks' time, is the Poetry Book Society choice for this autumn.
Yeah.
So another exclusive for you here there as well. And Mona and Karen together have edited an anthology that has just come out on through Faber and Faber called Nature Matters. And it's quite a remarkable anthology in that it does a wonderful bit of shifting the lens through which we view nature poetry, and in particular through that of the global majority. And in the introduction, Mona and Karen say, this is hardly a radical idea, although here in the UK it is novel. Mona, what were you trying to achieve with that shift?
Thank you. Thank you for all your wonderful poems. Is it better? I think I might just use the mic because it's better, because I've got a small voice. So, yes, this beautiful book is in the world. It's only been in the world for 3 weeks. And I guess what I want to say is I want to make a big claim about this book, actually, because I actually think that it offers up a new way of conceptualizing our relationship with the planet. And the reason I think it does that is actually, I relate back to what Ruth was saying about why there's an impulse to write into nature. And I think that very human primal impulse, which is to verbally, first of all, artistically insinuate ourselves into the world. We also do it with language. We verbally insinuate ourselves and interlace ourselves into the natural world. And we've always done that. But I think what's sort of happened in this country, in the publishing industry, is that we haven't been gathered. And when I say we, I'm talking about poets from the global majority, poets from the diaspora that have been writing here for a long time. And I noticed that when I was actually a poet in residence in a bird sanctuary in 2020 in lockdown. It was the best job I've ever had. And I was taken around this bird sanctuary I had. It wasn't an area I knew. I didn't consider myself a nature poet. And what was really interesting is that my parents hail from Punjab, which is, the green lungs of India. And he came here, and my parents came here in the 1960s, like a lot of people from Punjab. And actually, immigration is such an urban experience. And so my parents never entered the countryside, and I didn't really know the countryside. So for the first time, I entered the world. And I wrote poems, and I suddenly, my Punjabi was aroused for the first time. And, when I was syllabizing the birds, which was an incredible experience. I mean, it was incredible because it is a very, very primal impulse that we've always had in ancient times that actually try to interpret what the birds are saying. So that's where it came from. And when I was there, I wondered who else was writing this work. And I wrote a tweet in 2020. I think we've spoken about it. And the tweet was simply, "Where are we? Where is this work? Where has it been gathered?" And the tweet went viral, and many publishers contacted me and asked, there's a real deficit. We need something that gathers up these voices, because it cannot be right that we have just one singular lens of looking at the world. It cannot be right. We have to reflect those voices. And so this is the product of 4 years of work with my wonderful co-editor, Karen. And we worked on this book, and it's been a passion project. And it's an incredible book. It really is. And we're so proud of it. So that's where the book came from. So I know that we're running out of time, but I just wanted to read you a couple of my poems from Cly. I'll read, this is 3 Ways with a Lapwing. It's got a bit of Punjabi in it. 3 ways with a lapwing. Standing here in the dark rain, a pair of lapwings softly announce themselves. I too am a visitor, and sometimes the truth can other us like tup, barish, and hover. All the weather words I take out for you now. Yesterday I listened to the song of a warbler. Slowed right down, it sounded like a fox on its errands in the dark. Cuckoo, way, the lapwings call. Or perhaps they instruct as I travel to the back of a dream with a familiar sound. Do you know that if you push against the wind, 1,000 rivets loosen? Perhaps we are only asking the wrong question, and I need another language for all the vanishings. And I'll just read one last poem, which is, so what happened is the poems that I wrote when I was at CLI, they were embedded digitally into the landscape. So as walkers walked down the paths, and they had their headphones on, you could suddenly just have the poem like arrive in your headset. And I wrote poems for different birds and for the world of CLI. And I also wrote a poem for the human, because without the human hand, the world of CLI wouldn't exist. And that was really interesting to me. And so I embedded a poem for the human in the North Sea, right at the top of those churning waters. For the human. Voice of a poem buried in the shingle North Sea. Oh, and this is a sonnet. We say a heart is heavy when it aches, as a hand aches, writing lines in the dark. On the highest shelf of my heart there sits a limpet, empty of course, and next to that, and this is the human part, there's a pistol. Surviving inside the throat of this pistol is the body of a small bird with her own heart beating out, fluttering inside the barrel. Heart. My resolution is not to ache but to hold. Birds arrive, birds depart, banking, swerving into the marshes, populating these lines. A colony of cormorants lands lightly on a ruby samphired ledge. So many birds, their hearts all moving, much faster than mine. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. We've got a few minutes for questions, so if you have any, please wave. Let yourself be known. So we have one there.
I was just thinking about your opening question. And I'm actually just wondering what you all think. Do you think nature is a poet?
That's a very good question. Who wants to take that?
Nature is a maker, and poetry comes from making. So I think maybe we get our idea of poetics and what poetry is from nature. Yeah.
I'll add to that. Is the impulse has been there since, as soon as we've had language, we immediately turned to it to describe what was around us, and so the two are almost umbilically intertwined in that way. So, but I think the way that you framed it is very intriguing. I like that. So thank you. In the front row, please. Or the second row, please.
So I was just thinking about this point that came up, which is, I guess, the intersection of nature and politics, and maybe nature sitting outside of politics. But I'm just curious as to what Dipanjali thinks about it, having lived in Delhi, where nature can be political, I think, probably. I don't know. I just want to know how you explore that in your poems, because, again, I'm just in, like, for example, in Delhi, parks can be, I guess, just the best sort of example of a democratic space, because there's so many others that are lacking that when it comes to spaces, public spaces in India. So yeah, I just kind of was curious as to what you think about that. Thank you.
Am I still audible?
Thank you. I think actually sometimes I find these public spaces, like the extremely well manicured sort of parks and public spaces in Delhi or in any of the metropolitan cities in India, I find them quite dissonant in a way, because I think for me the things that fascinate me about nature in these cities is actually things growing where they aren't welcome or where they shouldn't be. because I find that a lot of the diversity that actually exists, like ecologically speaking, in Delhi, and a lot of the inspiration that I draw from, especially like now, having progressed a little further in my writing practice, is from these spaces where unwelcome things are sort of growing as vines, as weeds, as sort of things that suppose the state government is like very meticulously always trying to prune and cut down, but they kind of insist on being there despite it all. And that is something that I find like more fascinating than being in a park. But of course, also at the same time, I think like as a woman, being in a park, I think in Delhi is quite a I want to say it's not always like a safe experience when you're there. So you might be there thinking, okay, I'll go look at some flowers and, be inspired, but you would probably just be harassed. And that is also something that I find like recently making its way into like my sort of poetics and sort of like the language that I deploy in sort of discussing nature, because I think that dissonance, those things that sort of inspire a tremendous degree of alienation, but I still keep going back to them, that is something that forms the crux of my practice now.
Thank you. I'm afraid we are at time. And so I'm going to have to send you out into the jungle that is the Euston Road, I'm afraid. But please, can you put your hands together to join me in thanking Dipanjali, Seán, Ruth, Karen, and Mona. And thank you all for coming and spending time with us as well. Thank you very much.